German Shepherd was painted with markers by strangers. What happened next left everyone in tears. What you're about to listen to will absolutely shock you. A simple afternoon at the park turned into something nobody could have ever imagined. Like, share, subscribe, and comment below where you're watching from, because this story will stay with you forever. The sun hung bright over Willowbrook Park that Tuesday afternoon, casting long shadows across the playground, where children's laughter mixed with the distant hum of traffic. 5-year-old Max clutched his mom Sarah's hand tightly as they walked toward the splash pad, his eyes wide with excitement at the thought of running through the water jets. The park buzzed with families enjoying the perfect weather, parents chatting on benches while their kids played tag and climbed monkey bars. But then everything stopped. A sound cut through the cheerful noise, a low, painful whimper that made every conversation pause. Max's grip tightened on Sarah's fingers as they both turned toward the sound. From behind the concrete wall of the splash pad, something moved, something that made Sarah's breath catch in her throat. A German Shepherd stumbled into view, but this wasn't like any dog they'd ever seen. Bright neon stripes covered his beautiful brown and black coat, hot pink zigzags across his back, electric blue circles around his eyes, lime green spirals down his legs. The poor animal shook uncontrollably, pawing desperately at his face with his back foot, trying to scratch away something that clearly burned. "Oh my God," Sarah whispered, her hand flying to cover her mouth. The dog's eyes were red and watery, streaming tears that mixed with the artificial colors dripping down his snout. He kept shaking his head violently, as if trying to throw off whatever was causing him pain. The bright markers had been applied so thickly that some areas looked crusty, like dried paint on a canvas. A group of teenagers stood nearby, phones raised high, recording everything. One of them, a boy with a backwards baseball cap, was actually laughing. "Dude, this is going to get so many views," he shouted to his friends. "Look how colorful he is." Max's bottom lip started to tremble. He looked up at his mom with those big brown eyes that always made Sarah's heart melt. "Mommy, why is the doggy crying?" Before Sarah could answer, the dog stumbled closer to them. Other families were backing away, some pulling their children behind them, others just staring in shock. The teenagers kept filming, their laughter getting louder as the dog's distress became more obvious. "It's non-toxic, chill out," one of the teens called out when an older man approached them with an angry expression. "We checked the label before we used it. The dog's fine." But the dog was clearly not fine. He kept pawing at his eyes, whimpering with each movement. The sound was heartbreaking, not the playful bark of a happy dog, but the desperate cry of an animal in real pain. Sarah felt her own eyes filling with tears as she watched the poor creature suffer. She'd always been sensitive to animals in distress, but seeing this level of cruelty made her stomach turn. The dog was beautiful beneath all that artificial color. A majestic German Shepherd with intelligent eyes and a noble bearing that even his current state couldn't hide. Max suddenly let go of his mom's hand and took a step toward the dog. "He's trying to tell us something," the little boy said softly. "He's saying it hurts real bad." The crowd around them had grown larger, but nobody was doing anything. Some people were taking pictures with their phones, others were just watching like it was some kind of show. A few parents were hurrying their children away, not wanting them to see the disturbing scene. "Someone should call animal control," a woman behind them suggested. "Yeah, but that could take forever," her husband replied. "Poor thing looks like he's in agony." The dog seemed to hear their conversation because he suddenly looked directly at Max and Sarah. There was something in his eyes, not just pain, but intelligence, recognition, like he was choosing them out of all the people in the park. Sarah knelt down beside Max, her heart breaking as she watched the dog's continued suffering. The bright colors seemed even more garish up close, and she could smell the sharp chemical scent of the markers. "What kind of monsters would do this to an innocent animal?" she whispered. The teenagers were still filming, but their laughter was starting to die down as more adults in the park began giving them dirty looks. The boy with the backwards cap was getting defensive. "Look, we're not hurting him permanently or anything. It's just temporary paint. He'll be fine in a few days." "A few days?" an elderly woman snapped at him. "That poor animal is obviously in pain right now." Max tugged on his mom's sleeve. "Mommy, can we help him, please?" Sarah looked at her 5-year-old son, then back at the suffering dog. Every instinct told her to get involved, to do something, anything to help ease this creature's pain. But she also knew that approaching a distressed animal could be dangerous, especially one this size. The dog made the decision for her. He walked slowly toward them, his head hanging low, still shaking occasionally from whatever was bothering his eyes. When he reached Max, he did something that made the entire crowd go silent. He gently pressed his head against the little boy's stomach, and just stood there, as if surrendering himself to Max's care. Max's small hands instinctively went to the dog's head, carefully avoiding the marker-covered areas. "It's okay, puppy," he whispered. "We're going to help you feel better." Sarah felt tears rolling down her cheeks. The trust this animal was showing, even in his pain and confusion, was overwhelming. She pulled out her phone to call animal control, but something made her hesitate. The way the dog was looking at Max, the way Max was looking back, there was a connection there that she couldn't ignore. "We need to get this stuff off him," Sarah said, making a decision that would change everything. "The park restroom has sinks. Maybe we can at least wash his eyes out." The teenagers started to protest. "Hey, you can't just take someone's dog," the one with the backwards cap called out. "Someone's dog?" Sarah turned to face them, her voice shaking with anger. "You mean the dog you just tortured for views on social media? This animal doesn't belong to you." "We found him wandering around," another teen said defensively. "Nobody was watching him." Max looked up at his mom with hope in his eyes. "Can we really help him, Mommy?" The dog seemed to understand what they were discussing because he took a step toward the restroom building, then looked back at them as if asking them to follow. It was the strangest thing, like he knew exactly what they were planning. Sarah nodded to Max. "Let's go see what we can do." As they started walking toward the restroom, the crowd began to disperse. Some people followed to watch, others went back to their activities, and the teenagers finally put their phones away and slunk off toward the parking lot. But Sarah could hear them muttering among themselves, and she had a feeling this wasn't over. The restroom building was older, with deep utility sinks that would be perfect for washing a large dog. Sarah had brought a small bottle of gentle soap in her purse. She always carried it for Max's messy hands after playground time. It wasn't much, but it was a start. The dog followed them into the restroom without any hesitation, as if he knew this was his chance for relief. When Sarah turned on the water and tested the temperature, he actually moved closer to the sink. "He knows we're trying to help him," Max said in wonder. Sarah began carefully cupping water in her hands and letting it run over the dog's eyes first. The relief was immediate. His shaking lessened and some of the tension left his body. But as the first layer of marker began to wash away, something strange appeared underneath. Faint marks, squared symbols, like someone had drawn on the dog before the teenagers ever found him. "Max, look at this," Sarah whispered, her voice filled with confusion. "There are other marks under the marker, older ones." Max stood on his tiptoes to get a better look, as his mom gently washed more of the colorful paint away. The symbols were small and precise, definitely not random scribbles. They looked almost like a code. "Mommy, I've seen those squares before," Max said quietly, his little eyebrows scrunched in concentration. "Where, sweetie?" "I don't remember exactly, but..." Max reached out to trace one of the symbols with his finger. "They mean something important." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. What had started as a simple act of kindness was becoming something much more complicated. Who was this dog really, and why did someone put coded symbols on him before the teenagers ever touched him? The dog seemed to sense their confusion because he did something that made both Max and Sarah gasp. He lifted his front paw and gently tapped the side of the sink. 2 light taps, then 1 harder tap. Then he looked directly at Max as if waiting for a response. Max's eyes went wide. "The squares, Mommy! 2 empty squares and 1 filled square. He's copying the pattern." Sarah felt her heart racing. This was no ordinary stray dog. This was something else entirely. Something that would change their lives forever. Just as she was processing this revelation, the restroom door swung open. A man in an animal control uniform stood in the doorway, his expression stern. "I'm going to need you to step away from that animal," he said firmly. "We received multiple calls about a painted dog, and policy requires that he be brought in immediately for evaluation." Sarah's heart sank. They'd barely begun to help the poor creature, And now he was going to be taken away to some sterile facility where nobody would understand the mysterious symbols or the strange way he communicated. Max looked up at the officer with tears in his eyes. "Please, mister, his skin is still on fire. Can't we have just a little more time to help him?" The officer's expression softened slightly as he looked at the 5-year-old boy, but he shook his head. "I'm sorry, son, but rules are rules. The animal needs proper medical attention, and we can't have civilians attempting to treat unknown substances." The dog seemed to understand what was happening because he pressed even closer to Max, his whole body trembling again. But this time, it wasn't from pain. It was from fear. Sarah was about to plead with the officer when the dog did something that left everyone speechless. He slowly walked over to the animal control officer, sat down directly in front of him, and then deliberately walked back to Max. Then he pressed his head against Max's stomach again and went completely limp, as if he was surrendering himself only to the little boy's care. The officer stared at the scene in amazement. In his 15 years of animal control work, he'd never seen anything like it. The dog was making a choice, a very clear, very deliberate choice about who he trusted. The officer started, then stopped. He looked at Max, then at Sarah, then back at the dog, who was still pressed against the little boy. "Policy says the animal has to come with me, but..." He paused, clearly struggling with his decision. "But what?" Sarah asked hopefully. "But I guess policy doesn't say exactly when he has to come with me." The officer looked at his watch. "It's 4:30 now. I could come back to check on the situation at 8:30. That would give you 4 hours to continue the cleaning process, but after that, he has to come in for proper evaluation." Max looked up at his mom with a hope shining in his eyes. 4 hours, Mommy. That's enough time, right?" Sarah nodded, though she wasn't sure 4 hours would be enough time for anything. She didn't even know what they were trying to accomplish beyond getting the dog clean. But something told her that those mysterious symbols were important, and 4 hours might be just enough time to figure out what they meant. As the officer left, Sarah felt a strange mixture of relief and anxiety. They had bought some time, but time for what? What were they supposed to do with a coded dog and a 4-hour deadline? The dog seemed to sense her uncertainty because he walked over to the restroom door and pawed at it gently. Then he looked back at them, his intelligent eyes seeming to say, "Follow me." Max tugged on his mom's sleeve. "I think he wants to show us something." Outside the restroom, the dog didn't head back toward the playground or the parking lot like Sarah expected. Instead, he walked with purpose toward the far end of the park, past the tennis courts and the old maintenance shed. His steps were steady now, no longer the pain stumbling from before. The cool water had clearly given him some relief, though patches of neon marker still clung to his fur like a rainbow nightmare. Sarah followed reluctantly, one hand on Max's shoulder to keep him close. The sun was starting to sink lower in the sky, casting longer shadows across the park. Most of the families had gone home for dinner, leaving the place feeling strangely empty and quiet. "Where is he taking us, Mommy?" Max whispered, his voice filled with curiosity rather than fear. The dog stopped at the edge of the park, where a chain-link fence separated the recreation area from the old railroad underpass. Sarah had walked past this spot hundreds of times during their park visits, but she'd never really paid attention to it. Now, as the dog pressed his nose against the fence and looked back at them meaningfully, she found herself really looking at the concrete wall of the underpass for the first time. And that's when she saw them, the symbols. The exact same symbols they'd found under the marker on the dog's fur. 2 empty squares, one filled square, and an arrow pointing toward a gap in the fence that she'd never noticed before. "Max, look," Sarah breathed, pointing at the chalk symbols on the wall. They were drawn at exactly the right height for a child to see, but an adult might miss them completely if they weren't looking carefully. Max's eyes went wide. "It's the same pattern! The squares from the doggy!" The dog had squeezed through the gap in the fence and was now standing on the other side, waiting for them. Sarah looked around nervously. The park was almost deserted, and following a strange dog through a hole in a fence toward an abandoned underpass wasn't exactly what she'd call safe parenting. But something about the way the dog was watching them, the intelligence in his eyes, made her trust him. Against every logical thought in her head, she helped Max through the gap and followed him to the other side. The underpass was cooler, the concrete walls providing shade from the evening sun. Their footsteps echoed strangely in the enclosed space, and Sarah could hear the distant sound of cars passing overhead on the bridge. The dog led them to a specific spot near one of the support pillars where more chalk symbols covered the wall. But these weren't just random marks. They formed a clear pattern, like a trail of breadcrumbs leading somewhere specific. 2 empty squares, 1 filled square, arrow. The pattern repeated 5 times, each one pointing further into the underpass. "It's like a treasure map," Max said in wonder, tracing the symbols with his finger. At the end of the symbol trail, tucked behind a rusty pipe and wrapped in a clear plastic bag, was something that made Sarah's hands shake. A small notebook, its cover decorated with the same square symbols they'd been following. She picked it up with trembling fingers and opened it to the first page. In neat, careful handwriting, someone had written, "If Scout finds you, follow the squares. But only if you really want to help." "Scout," Max said softly, looking at the dog. "Is that your name, boy?" The dog's tail wagged for the first time since they'd met him, and he gave 2 light taps with his paw, then 1 hard tap, the same pattern as the squares. Sarah flipped through the notebook, her heart racing as she began to understand what they'd stumbled into. Page after page of carefully drawn maps, showing locations all around their city. Each location was marked with the square symbols, and each one had a note describing someone who needed help. "Mrs. Chen on Maple Street can't reach high shelves anymore, too proud to ask for help. Squares on her mailbox means safe to leave groceries. Tommy Rodriguez, age 8, gets bullied at school, takes the long way home. Squares on the bus stop means someone is watching out for him. The homeless veteran by the library pretends he doesn't need food, but he's starving. Squares on the bench mean it's safe to leave a meal." Sarah felt tears stinging her eyes as she realized what this was. Someone had created an entire network of kindness codes, a way for people to help others without embarrassing them or putting anyone in danger. "Who made this book?" she whispered. Max was petting Scout, who had settled down beside him with a contented sigh. Maybe the person who drew the squares on Scout before those mean teenagers painted over them. Sarah flipped to the back of the notebook, looking for some kind of signature or name. On the very last page, she found a single line written in the same careful handwriting. "When you're ready to join the network, bring Scout to the Riverside Community Center, room 7. Tell them Charlie sent you." "Charlie," Sarah murmured. "Who's Charlie, Scout?" The dog's ears perked up at the name, and his tail wagged again. But before Sarah could ask any more questions, her phone buzzing interrupted her thoughts. She glanced at the screen and felt her stomach drop. It was a news alert. "Viral video shows painted dog in Willowbrook Park. Animal cruelty investigation underway." Sarah clicked on the link and watched in horror as shaky phone footage showed Scout stumbling around the park, covered in neon markers and clearly in distress. The video had been viewed over 50,000 times in just the past hour, and the comments section was exploding with outrage. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was that some of the comments included photos of the chalk symbols around the city, with people asking if they were connected to the painted dog incident. "Oh no," Sarah breathed, scrolling through comment after comment. "Scout, I think we might have a problem." Someone had connected the dots between Scout and the symbol network, and if the symbols were being exposed on social media, that meant all the people Charlie was trying to help quietly might suddenly find themselves in the spotlight. Max looked up from petting Scout, sensing his mom's distress. "What's wrong, Mommy?" Before Sarah could answer, Scout suddenly stood up and growled low in his throat. It wasn't an aggressive growl, but a warning. Someone was coming. Heavy footsteps echoed through the underpass, and Sarah instinctively pulled Max behind the concrete pillar. Scout positioned himself protectively in front of both of them, his body tense and alert. A man emerged from the shadows at the other end of the underpass. He was tall and thick-set, wearing a security guard uniform that looked official but somehow wrong. His eyes were scanning the walls, looking at the chalk symbols with obvious interest. "I know you're in here," the man called out, his voice echoing off the concrete walls. "Saw the video online, figured the dog would lead me right to Charlie's little secret network." Sarah's blood ran cold. This wasn't some random person who'd seen the viral video. This was someone who knew about Charlie and the symbols, someone who'd been looking for them. Scout's growl grew louder, and the man smiled in a way that made Sarah's skin crawl. "There you are," he said, spotting them behind the pillar. "You picked up Charlie's dog, huh? Smart animal. Too smart for his own good." "What do you want?" Sarah asked, trying to keep her voice steady for Max's sake. "I want to know where Charlie is," the man said, taking a step closer. "He's been causing problems for some very important people with his little charity network. People who don't like their business being watched." Sarah clutched the notebook tighter, suddenly understanding that they had stumbled into something much bigger than a simple kindness network. "I don't know who Charlie is. We just found this dog painted with markers. We were trying to help him." The man laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Lady, that dog has been mapping every vulnerable person in this city for months. Charlie uses him to scout locations, check on people, gather information. You really think this was all about helping little old ladies with groceries?" Max pressed closer to his mom, confused by the adult conversation, but sensing the danger in the man's voice. Scout had moved even closer to them, his body coiled like a spring ready to launch. "Even if that were true," Sarah said carefully, "what's wrong with helping people?" "Nothing wrong with helping people," the man replied. "But there's something very wrong with documenting which houses are empty during the day, which elderly people live alone, which kids walk home without supervision. Information like that is valuable to the right people." Sarah felt sick to her stomach. Was it possible that Charlie's kindness network was actually something darker? Had they been naive to trust Scout and follow the symbols? But then Scout did something that changed everything. He walked calmly over to the man, sat down in front of him, and looked directly at Sarah. Then he barked once, sharp and clear. It was a signal, a warning, but not about the man in front of him. Sarah heard the footsteps behind them just a second too late. 2 more men had entered the underpass from the other direction, cutting off their escape route. They were wearing the same fake security uniforms, and they were both bigger than the first man. "Got them cornered, Rick," one of them called out. "Yeah, but the dog's being protective. Might need to dart him." Sarah saw one of the men behind them pulling something from his belt that looked like a tranquilizer gun. Her mama bear instincts kicked in, and she grabbed Max's hand. "Run," she whispered to him. "When I say go, run toward the fence as fast as you can." But Max surprised her. Instead of looking scared, he looked angry. "You're the bad guys," he said loudly, his 5-year-old voice echoing through the underpass. "You're the ones hurting people, not Charlie." Scout barked again, and suddenly Sarah understood. These men weren't just looking for Charlie. They were the reason Charlie had created the network in the first place. They were predators, using the chaos of the viral video as cover to finally track down the person who'd been protecting potential victims. The man with the tranquilizer gun raised it toward Scout, but the dog was ready. He leaped sideways, putting himself between the weapon and Max, and let out a bark so loud and sharp that it echoed through the underpass like a gunshot. And then something amazing happened. From both ends of the underpass, more dogs appeared. Not strays, but family pets with collars and tags, walking calmly but purposefully toward the confrontation. A golden retriever, 2 beagles, a little terrier mix, and a massive Great Dane. Each one took a position around Sarah and Max, forming a protective circle. "What the hell?" Rick muttered, looking around nervously. The dogs weren't aggressive, but their message was clear. They weren't going to let these men hurt the people Scout was protecting. "It's the network," Sarah breathed, suddenly understanding. "Scout called them somehow. They're all part of Charlie's network." But Rick and his men weren't giving up easily. "I don't care how many dogs you've got," he snarled. "We came here for information, and we're not leaving without it." That's when Sarah heard the most beautiful sound in the world. Sirens. Police sirens, getting closer by the second. Scout's tail was wagging now, and he looked almost smug as Rick and his men realized they were trapped. The dogs had surrounded them completely, and the police were almost there. "This isn't over," Rick spat as the first police car pulled up outside the underpass. "Charlie can't hide forever." But Sarah had a feeling that Charlie had been hiding in plain sight all along. As the police officers entered the underpass with their hands on their weapons, she looked down at Scout and saw something in his eyes that made her gasp. Intelligence. Not just animal intelligence, but human intelligence. The kind of look that said he understood every word that had been spoken. "Scout," she whispered, kneeling down beside him. "You're not just Charlie's dog, are you?" Scout looked directly into her eyes and gave 2 light taps with his paw, then 1 hard tap. The same pattern as the squares, the same pattern he'd been using to communicate all along. And in that moment, Sarah realized the truth that would change everything. Charlie hadn't just trained Scout to help with the network. Scout was Charlie. Comment below if you figured out Scout's secret before Sarah did. And what do you think will happen when the police discover the truth about the kindness network? The police officers moved swiftly through the underpass, their flashlights cutting through the growing darkness. Officer Martinez, a veteran cop with kind eyes, took one look at the scene and immediately understood that something unusual was happening. The circle of dogs around Sarah and Max, the three men in fake security uniforms backing against the wall, and Scout standing protectively in front of the family painted a clear picture. "Everyone stay calm," Officer Martinez called out, his hand resting on his radio. "Ma'am, are you and your son okay?" Sarah nodded, though her heart was still pounding. "These men cornered us. They were asking about someone named Charlie and threatening to hurt Scout." Rick, the leader of the fake security guards, tried to regain control of the situation. "Officer, we're private security investigating a case of animal abuse. This woman interfered with our investigation." Officer Martinez looked at Rick's uniform more closely, his experienced eyes catching details that Sarah had missed. "What company do you work for, sir?" Metro Security Services," Rick answered, but his hesitation was obvious. "Interesting, officer," Martinez said dryly, "because I know the owner of Metro Security personally, and he doesn't issue uniforms like that." He clicked on his radio. "Dispatch, I need you to run a check on Metro Security Services and see if they have any active investigations in the Willowbrook area." While they waited, Officer Martinez knelt down to Scout's eye level. "And what's your story, big guy? You're the famous painted dog from the video, aren't you?" Scout's tail wagged, and he walked over to the officer without any fear. Officer Martinez examined the remaining marker stains on Scout's fur, his expression growing more serious. "Whoever did this to you used some harsh chemicals. That's definitely animal cruelty." "It wasn't us!" one of Rick's men protested. "We're trying to catch the real criminals." "The real criminals," Sarah said firmly, "are the teenagers who painted him for social media views. We were just trying to help clean him off." Officer Martinez's radio crackled to life. "Martinez, Metro Security says they have no active investigations in your area and no employees matching those descriptions. Also, we've got reports of 3 men in fake security uniforms harassing elderly residents on Maple Street earlier today." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. Maple Street was mentioned in Charlie's notebook. Mrs. Chen, who couldn't reach high shelves. These men had been targeting the people in the kindness network. Well, Officer Martinez said, standing up and facing Rick and his men. "Looks like you gentlemen have some explaining to do. Hands behind your backs, please." As the officer began reading them their rights, Rick made one last desperate attempt. "You don't understand. That dog is part of a surveillance network. Charlie's been using him to spy on people, gathering information for criminal purposes." Max, who had been quietly petting one of the other dogs, suddenly spoke up. "That's not true. Charlie helps people. The notebook shows all the nice things they do." Sarah quickly handed the notebook to Officer Martinez, explaining how they'd found it and what it contained. The officer flipped through the pages, his eyebrows raising higher with each entry. "This is incredible," he murmured. "We've been getting reports for months about mysterious good deeds around the city. Groceries appearing on doorsteps, bullies being scared away from kids, homeless veterans finding meals. We could never figure out who was behind it." Scout had been sitting quietly during the conversation, but now he stood up and walked over to the chalk symbols on the wall. He sat down directly beneath them and looked back at Officer Martinez expectantly. "He's trying to tell you something," Max said. "Scout's really smart. He talks with his paws." Officer Martinez looked skeptical until Scout demonstrated. 2 light taps, 1 hard tap. Then he pointed his nose at the symbols on the wall. "I'll be damned," the officer breathed. "He really is communicating." Sarah knelt down beside Scout, her mind racing. If Scout really was Charlie, or at least Charlie's partner, then he might know where the real Charlie was. "Scout, can you show us where Charlie is? Can you take us to him?" Scout's reaction was immediate and heartbreaking. His ears drooped, his tail stopped wagging, and he let out a long, mournful whine. Then he walked over to a section of the wall where there were no chalk symbols and sat down with his back to everyone. "Oh," Sarah whispered, understanding flooding through her. "Charlie's gone, isn't he, Scout?" Max looked confused. "What do you mean gone, Mommy?" Officer Martinez was watching the exchange with growing interest. "Ma'am, what exactly are you thinking?" Sarah looked at the notebook in the officer's hands, then at Scout's dejected posture, then at the careful symbols on the walls. Everything was starting to make sense in a way that broke her heart. "I think Charlie was Scout's person," she said slowly. "His partner in the kindness network. And I think something happened to Charlie, which is why Scout was alone in the park today." Scout turned around at the sound of Charlie's name and walked back to Sarah. He pressed his head against her leg and looked up at her with eyes that held too much sadness for any animal to bear alone. Officer Martinez was quiet for a moment, processing everything. The fake security guards mentioned that Charlie had been causing problems for important people. What if Charlie discovered something he wasn't supposed to? What if that's why these men were really looking for him? Before anyone could answer, Officer Martinez's radio crackled again. "Martinez, we need you to respond to a wellness check at 847 River Road. Elderly male, hasn't been seen by neighbors in several days." Anonymous caller was concerned. Sarah felt her breath catch. River Road. That's near the community center mentioned in the notebook. Scout's reaction confirmed her suspicion. He immediately became alert, his tail wagging frantically. He ran to the entrance of the underpass, then back to Sarah, then to the entrance again. "He wants us to go there," Max said. "Don't you, Scout?" Officer Martinez looked at his watch. It was almost 7 o'clock, and Sarah remembered that the animal control officer would be back at 8:30 to take Scout away. They were running out of time. "Officer, could we come with you to the wellness check?" Sarah asked. Scout clearly knows something about it, and he might be able to help. The officer hesitated. "It's highly irregular to bring civilians to a wellness check." Scout solved the problem by walking directly to the police car and sitting down beside it, looking back at everyone expectantly. "I think Scout just made the decision for us," Officer Martinez said with a small smile. "But if we're doing this, we're doing it by the book. You and your son stay in the car unless I say otherwise. Understood?" Sarah nodded eagerly. Anything was better than losing Scout to animal control before they figured out what had happened to Charlie. The drive to River Road took 15 minutes through increasingly quiet neighborhoods. Scout sat in the back seat with Max, his nose pressed to the window as if he was watching for familiar landmarks. When they turned onto River Road, Scout's whining became more urgent. 847 River Road was a small, neat house with a well-maintained garden and a blue mailbox. But the yard was too neat, the mail was overflowing, and there were no lights on despite the approaching darkness. Officer Martinez parked in the driveway and turned to Sarah. "Remember, you stay in the car unless I call for you." But Scout had other plans. The moment the car door opened, he bolted toward the house with purpose, not frantically like a lost dog, but with the confident stride of someone coming home. "Scout, wait!" Sarah called, but he was already at the front door, pawing at it and whining. Officer Martinez approached the house cautiously, his hand on his radio. "Sir, this is the police. We're here for a wellness check." No answer. Scout was becoming more agitated, alternating between pawing at the door and looking back at the officer pleadingly. Finally, he did something that made everyone's heart stop. He sat down, lifted his paw, and scratched at the door in a very specific pattern. Scratch, scratch, pause, scratch, like a code. From inside the house, they heard a faint tapping in response. Tap, tap, pause, tap. "Someone's in there," Officer Martinez said, reaching for his radio. "Dispatch, I need backup and EMTs at 847 River Road. Possible medical emergency." He tried the front door and found it unlocked. "Sir, I'm coming in." "Police." Scout immediately ran into the house, leading Officer Martinez through a small living room toward a back bedroom. Sarah could hear the officer calling out, and then his voice changed to urgent commands for the EMTs to hurry. Max was gripping Sarah's hand tightly. "Is Charlie in there, Mommy?" Before Sarah could answer, Officer Martinez appeared in the doorway. "Ma'am, I need Scout out here. There's an elderly gentleman inside who's been having a medical emergency. He's conscious but weak, and he keeps asking for his dog." Sarah's heart leaped. "Charlie's alive?" "Appears so, and he's very concerned about Scout. Says he's been worried sick because Scout never came home 3 days ago." Sarah felt tears of relief streaming down her face. Charlie was alive. Scout hadn't lost his partner after all, but that raised new questions about how Scout had ended up painted in the park. The EMTs arrived within minutes and began working on Charlie. Officer Martinez came back to the car to explain what they had found. Mr. Charlie Hoffman, age 72. He had a stroke 3 days ago and hasn't been able to reach his phone or get to the door. He's been surviving on crackers and water from his bedside table. Says Scout has been missing since Tuesday morning. Tuesday morning, Sarah repeated. That's when we found him painted in the park. Here's the interesting part, Officer Martinez continued. Mr. Hoffman says Scout never leaves his side voluntarily. The only time Scout goes out alone is when he's working, checking on people in their network. But Scout always comes home by dinner time. Max looked up at his mom with wide eyes. So Scout was working when those mean teenagers found him? Officer Martinez nodded. That's what it looks like. And Mr. Hoffman is adamant that Scout would never have been wandering around randomly. He says Scout was probably trying to get help for him. Sarah felt pieces of the puzzle clicking into place. The fake security guards said they'd been harassing people on Maple Street. What if they were following Scout, trying to figure out the network? What if they're the reason Scout couldn't get home? That's exactly what I'm thinking, Officer Martinez agreed. We'll know more when we question them properly, but right now, we need to get Mr. Hoffman to the hospital. As the EMTs wheeled Charlie out on a stretcher, Scout tried to follow them into the ambulance. Charlie, though weak, managed to lift his hand and speak in a raspy voice. Scout, stay with the nice family. I'll be okay. You did good, boy. You found help. Scout whined and pawed at the ambulance door, clearly torn between staying with Charlie and accepting that he couldn't go with him to the hospital. Sarah knelt down beside Scout and gently took his face in her hands. Scout, Charlie needs you to be strong right now. We'll make sure you can see him as soon as the doctors say it's okay. Scout looked into her eyes for a long moment, then back at the ambulance where Charlie was being loaded. Finally, he sat down beside Sarah and placed his paw on her leg. 2 light taps, 1 hard tap. What's he saying, Mommy? Max asked. Sarah smiled through her tears. I think he's saying thank you. Officer Martinez crouched down beside them. Mrs. Sarah Chen. Mrs. Chen, Mr. Hoffman is going to be in the hospital for several days while he recovers. Scout can't stay alone in the house, and animal control will want to take him to the shelter until Mr. Hoffman is released. But what? But Mr. Hoffman specifically asked if the family who helped Scout could take care of him temporarily. He says Scout has good judgment about people, and if Scout trusts you, then he does too. Sarah looked at Max, whose face was lit up with hope. She looked at Scout, who was watching her with those intelligent eyes that had seen so much. She thought about the notebook full of kindness codes, about Charlie's stroke, about the fake security guards who had been trying to destroy a network built on compassion. Of course, she said. Scout is part of our family now. Scout's tail wagged so hard his whole body wiggled, and he gave a little bark of joy. Max threw his arms around the big dog's neck and hugged him tight. But as they watched the ambulance disappear into the night, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that their adventure was far from over. The fake security guards had been arrested, but they'd been working for someone else, someone who saw Charlie's kindness network as a threat. Scout seemed to sense her concern because he walked over to Charlie's mailbox and sat down beneath it. There, drawn in faint chalk that was barely visible in the streetlight, was a message that made Sarah's blood run cold. A new symbol, not the friendly squares and arrows they'd been following all day. This one was different, harsh lines forming what looked like a warning. And it was fresh. Someone had drawn it recently. Very recently. What do you think the new symbol means? And who do you think is still after Charlie's network? Drop your theories below. The next morning brought both hope and fear to Sarah's household. Scout had slept on Max's bedroom floor, but Sarah could tell the dog hadn't really rested. Every small sound made his ears perk up, and he kept padding to the windows to peer out at the street. The threatening symbol from Charlie's mailbox was burned into Sarah's memory, and she found herself checking the locks on their doors multiple times. Max, however, was in heaven. He'd woken up early to feed Scout breakfast and had spent an hour brushing the last traces of marker from the dog's beautiful coat. "Look, Mommy," he called from the kitchen. "Scout's fur is so shiny now, he looks like a prince." Sarah smiled at her son's enthusiasm, but her phone had been buzzing all morning with notifications. The video of Scout painted with markers had gone viral overnight, shared across every social media platform with hashtags like #JusticeForScout and #AnimalAbuse. Most of the comments were supportive, but some made her nervous. Officer Martinez had texted her early that morning. Hospital says Charlie is stable but needs surgery. Won't be able to have visitors until tomorrow at earliest. Keep Scout safe. Still investigating the security guard case. Sarah was reading the message when Scout suddenly appeared at her side, pressing a folded piece of paper into her hand with his mouth. She looked down at it in confusion. "Where did you get this, Scout?" The paper looked like it had been slipped under their front door sometime during the night. Sarah's hands trembled as she unfolded it. In the same harsh handwriting as the symbol on Charlie's mailbox, someone had written, "The old man can't protect his network from a hospital bed. Return the dog and the notebook, or the network gets exposed. You have 24 hours. Sarah's blood ran cold. Someone knew where they lived. Someone was watching them. Scout was already moving toward the front door, his body language tense and alert. He sniffed around the doorframe, then sat down and gave his signature communication. 2 light taps with his paw, 1 hard tap. "What's wrong, Scout?" Max asked, sensing the tension in the room. Before Sarah could answer, Scout was at the window, growling low in his throat. A black SUV was parked across the street from their house, its windows tinted dark. It hadn't been there when Sarah checked the locks 20 minutes ago. Sarah grabbed her phone and called Officer Martinez. "There's someone watching our house," she said, without preamble when he answered. "Are you sure?" "Positive, and we found a threatening note this morning. Someone wants us to return Scout and Charlie's notebook. Stay inside and lock all your doors. I'm sending a patrol car over right now." But even as Sarah hung up, the black SUV was driving away. Whoever was watching them didn't want to be seen by the police. Scout remained agitated throughout the morning, pacing from window to window like a sentry. Around noon, Sarah's phone rang with a number she didn't recognize. "Hello? Mrs. Chen?" The voice was elderly, female, and frightened. "This is Eleanor Vasquez from Maple Street. I got your number from the police officer who interviewed me yesterday about those fake security guards." Sarah remembered Officer Martinez mentioning that the guards had been harassing people on Maple Street. "Yes, Mrs. Vasquez, is everything okay?" "No, dear, it's not. Someone broke into my house last night. They didn't take anything valuable, but they went through all my papers, and they left one of those awful symbols chalked on my front steps." Sarah felt sick. What kind of symbol? Harsh lines, like a warning. Nothing like the gentle square symbols that nice Charlie used to leave to let me know when groceries were on my porch. Scout had heard the conversation and was now standing at attention by the phone, his ears forward and alert. "Mrs. Vasquez, have you called the police?" "I did, but they said without any property stolen, there's not much they can do except file a report. But Mrs. Chen, I'm scared. I think whoever is doing this knows about all of us in Charlie's network." Sarah closed her eyes, thinking fast. "Mrs. Vasquez, do you have somewhere safe you can stay for a few days, with family or friends? My daughter lives in the next town over, but I hate to impose." "This isn't imposing, this is staying safe. Pack a bag and go to your daughter's house today. Don't tell anyone where you're going except the police." After Mrs. Vasquez hung up, Sarah called Officer Martinez back. "It's not just us," she told him. "They're targeting everyone in Charlie's network." "I was afraid of that," Officer Martinez said grimly. "We've had 3 more reports this morning. Break-ins, threatening symbols, people being followed. Whoever is behind this is escalating fast." "What do they want?" "Based on what the fake security guards told us before they lawyered up, there's someone who sees Charlie's kindness network as a threat to their own operation. Someone who profits from the vulnerability that Charlie was trying to protect." Sarah felt a chill of understanding. "You mean like predators? People who target the elderly and kids?" "Exactly. Charlie's network was making it harder for them to operate. When someone's being watched over, cared for, checked on regularly, they become much harder targets." Scout had been listening to the conversation, and now he walked over to Charlie's notebook, which Sarah had left on the coffee table. He nosed it open to a specific page and sat down, looking at Sarah expectantly. Sarah looked at the page Scout had chosen. It was a map of downtown, with several locations marked with the square symbols. But one location was circled in red ink with a note that made Sarah's heart race. Danger zone. Multiple reports of elderly residents being scammed. Avoid until further investigation. The address was 1247 Oak Street. Sarah looked it up on her phone and discovered it was a medical supply company called Golden Years Healthcare Solutions. "Officer Martinez," Sarah said slowly, "I think Scout just showed me something important. There's a company called Golden Years Healthcare Solutions that Charlie had marked as dangerous in his notebook. Hold on, let me look that up." There was a pause as Officer Martinez typed. "Interesting. We've had multiple complaints about that company over the past year. High-pressure sales tactics, overcharging for medical equipment, targeting elderly residents living alone. The perfect victims for someone running a scam operation," Sarah said. "And if Charlie's network was warning people about them, documenting their tactics, then Charlie became a threat that needed to be eliminated," Officer Martinez finished. "Mrs. Chen, I think you and Max need to be somewhere safe until we can figure this out." But Scout had other ideas. He walked to the front door and stood there, looking back at Sarah meaningfully. Then he gave his communication signal and nodded toward Charlie's notebook. "I think Scout wants to go to Charlie," Max said. "He's been missing him all morning." Sarah looked at her son, then at Scout, then at the notebook full of people who needed protection. "Officer Martinez, what if we're looking at this backwards?" "What do you mean?" "What if instead of hiding and waiting for them to come after us, we use Scout to find them first? He knows the network better than anyone. He might be able to lead us to whoever is behind this." There was a long pause. "Mrs. Chen, that's extremely dangerous. These people have already shown they're willing to hurt innocent victims." "But they're going to keep hurting people until we stop them," Sarah said, surprising herself with her determination. "Charlie risked everything to protect vulnerable people. Scout's been doing the same thing. Maybe it's time we did our part." Scout's tail was wagging now, and he was practically vibrating with energy. He clearly understood what Sarah was suggesting and approved. "I can't officially sanction a civilian investigation," Officer Martinez said carefully. "But if a concerned citizen happened to visit a hospitalized friend and happened to have their dog with them, and that dog happened to lead them somewhere interesting—" "We understand," Sarah said. "But Mrs. Chen, if you're going to do this, you need backup, and you need to be smart about it." An hour later, Sarah and Max were at Riverside General Hospital with Scout on a leash and Charlie's notebook in Sarah's purse. They'd told the front desk they were visiting Charlie Hoffman, and the kind nurse had made an exception to the no pets policy when she saw how excited Scout was. Charlie was awake when they entered his room, though he looked frail and tired. His face lit up when he saw Scout, who immediately went to his bedside and placed his head gently on the bed. "Scout, my good boy," Charlie whispered, his voice still weak from the stroke. "I was so worried about you. Mr. Hoffman, I'm Sarah Chen, and this is my son Max. We're the ones who found Scout in the park." Charlie's eyes filled with tears. "You saved him, and he led you to me. He's such a smart boy." "Mr. Hoffman," Sarah said gently, "we need to talk to you about your network. Someone is targeting the people you've been helping." Charlie's expression immediately became serious. "I was afraid of this. There have been people watching me for weeks. That's why I sent Scout out alone more often recently. I thought if I kept a lower profile—" "Tell us about Golden Years Healthcare Solutions," Sarah said, pulling out the notebook. Charlie's face darkened. "They're monsters. They target elderly people living alone, especially those with health problems. They sell overpriced equipment, push unnecessary services, and when people can't pay, they threaten to take their homes." "And you were documenting their activities?" "Scout was. He's incredible at gathering information without being noticed. We had almost enough evidence to take to the authorities when—" Charlie gestured weakly at his hospital bed. Scout had been listening to the conversation, and now he walked over to the window and stood alert, staring down at the parking lot. His body language changed, becoming tense and protective. "What is it, Scout?" Max asked. Sarah joined Scout at the window and felt her blood turn to ice. The same black SUV from their street was now parked in the hospital parking lot. "They followed us," she breathed. Charlie struggled to sit up straighter. "Sarah, you need to get Scout out of here. If they take him—" "They won't," Sarah said firmly. "Scout, can you show us how to get to Golden Years Healthcare without being followed?" Scout's ears perked up, and he gave his communication signal. Yes. Mr. Hoffman, we're going to finish what you and Scout started, Sarah said. But we need to know everything you've discovered about golden years. Charlie's eyes were bright with determination, despite his weakness. There's a safe in my house, behind the painting of the lighthouse in my bedroom. The combination is Scout's birthday, 0415. Everything you need is in there. Scout's birthday? Charlie smiled weakly. April 15th, the day I found him as a puppy, abandoned in an alley. The same day, I decided to start the Kindness Network. Scout nuzzled Charlie's hand, and Sarah could see the deep bond between them. This wasn't just a man and his dog. This was a partnership built on years of helping others. We'll be back, Sarah promised, and we'll bring proof that will stop golden years for good. As they prepared to leave, Charlie called out weakly, Sarah, be careful. The man behind golden years is Vincent Cardello. He's dangerous and he has connections everywhere. Don't underestimate him. Scout led them out of the hospital through a service exit that Sarah never would have found on her own. They emerged in an alley behind the building, well away from the black SUV in the main parking lot. How does Scout know about service exits? Max wondered aloud. Because he's been helping Charlie navigate around dangerous people for years, Sarah realized. He knows every safe route in the city. Scout guided them through a maze of back streets and alleys, moving with purpose and confidence. 20 minutes later, they were standing outside Charlie's house again, but this time they approached from the backyard. The safe behind the lighthouse painting contained exactly what Charlie had promised. Files, photographs, and recorded conversations documenting months of illegal activity by Golden Years Healthcare Solutions. There were contracts with forged signatures, bills for equipment that was never delivered, and recordings of Vincent Cardello himself threatening elderly customers. But the most damning evidence was a list of addresses. Every single person in Charlie's Kindness Network was on it, with notes about their vulnerabilities and how much money they might be worth to Golden Years. They've been hunting Charlie's people, Sarah breathed, using his network against him. Scout was pacing anxiously by the window. He could sense they were running out of time. Sarah's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Cute family. Would hate for anything to happen to them. Bring the dog and all of Charlie's files to 1247 Oak Street in 1 hour, or find out what happens to people who interfere with business. The message included a photo that made Sarah's knees weak. It was Max's school, with a timestamp from that morning. They knew about Max. They knew where he went to school. The war for Charlie's network was about to reach its final battle. Tell us in the comments, would you risk everything to protect strangers the way Sarah is about to do? Sarah stared at the photo of Max's school on her phone, her hands shaking with a mixture of fear and rage. These people weren't just threatening her anymore. They were threatening her child. The mama bear instinct that had driven her to help Scout in the first place now roared to life with a ferocity that surprised her. We're going to stop them, she said quietly, more to herself than to Max or Scout. Scout seemed to understand the gravity of the situation. He sat down in front of Sarah and looked directly into her eyes, then gave his communication signal. But this time, it was different. Instead of 2 light taps and 1 hard tap, he gave 1 strong, deliberate tap. A decision. A commitment. Max was looking through Charlie's files, his 5-year-old mind trying to process the adult concepts of fraud and intimidation. Mommy, why do these people want to hurt the nice old ladies and gentlemen? Because they're bullies, sweetheart, and bullies pick on people they think can't fight back. But Charlie and Scout fight back. Yes, they do. And now we're going to help them. Sarah's phone rang. Officer Martinez. Sarah, where are you? I went by your house and you weren't there. The patrol unit said they saw you leave with Scout and Max. We're at Charlie's house. Officer Martinez, they threatened Max's school. They have photos of where he goes to school. There was a long pause. Sarah, this has gone too far. You need to bring Max to the station where he'll be safe, and then we need to coordinate with federal authorities. This sounds like organized crime territory now. How long will that take? Could be days, maybe weeks to build a proper case. And how many more elderly people will Golden Years hurt in the meantime? Sarah asked. How many more victims while we wait for the proper authorities to maybe do something? Scout had been listening to the conversation, and now he walked over to a map on Charlie's wall. It was a detailed street map of their city, with colored pins marking every location in the Kindness Network. But there was something else on the map that Sarah hadn't noticed before. a cluster of red pins around the Golden Years building, each one marked with a date from the past 6 months. Officer Martinez, I think Charlie and Scout have been building a case for months. There's a map here showing surveillance of Golden Years going back half a year. Sarah, even if that's true, you can't just walk into a criminal organization's headquarters with a 5-year-old and a dog. But Scout was already moving toward the door, and Max was following him. I think Scout has a plan, Max said. Sarah looked at the evidence files, at the map with its careful documentation, at Scout's confident body language. Officer Martinez, what if we're not walking into their headquarters? What if we're walking into a trap they don't know we've set? What do you mean? Sarah was thinking fast, pieces of a plan forming in her mind. Charlie's been documenting Golden Years for months. He knows their routines, their security, their weaknesses, and Scout knows how to get in and out of places without being seen. Sarah, you're talking about breaking and entering. I'm talking about gathering evidence. Charlie already did the hard work. We just need to retrieve it. Scout had opened Charlie's front door and was standing there waiting, his intelligent eyes fixed on Sarah. In that moment, she realized that Scout wasn't just Charlie's partner in the kindness network. He was the brains behind a lot of their operations. Charlie provided the human connection and the planning, but Scout provided the reconnaissance and the street smarts. Officer Martinez, how long do we have before Vincent Cardello realizes we're not coming to his office? Probably not long, and when he figures out you're not showing up, he's going to escalate. Then we need to get to Golden Years before he does. Sarah hung up and knelt down in front of Max. Sweetheart, Mommy needs to do something very important to help protect all the nice people that Charlie and Scout take care of. But it might be a little scary. Max looked at Scout, who had come over to stand beside him. Will Scout be with us? Yes. Then I'm not scared. Scout's tail wagged once, and he nuzzled Max's hand. Then he walked over to a closet and nosed it open. Inside, Sarah discovered something that made her understand just how prepared Charlie had been for this moment. Emergency supplies, two-way radios, a first aid kit, copies of all the evidence files, and something that made Sarah do a double take. A Golden Years healthcare uniform shirt with a name tag reading, David Martinez, equipment delivery. Charlie was planning to infiltrate them, she breathed. Scout went to another part of the closet and emerged with a service dog vest that Sarah hadn't seen before. It was official looking, with patches and ID tags that would make Scout look like a working medical assistance animal rather than just a pet. He's done this before, Sarah realized. Scout's been going into Golden Years disguised as a service dog. Max clapped his hands in delight. Scout's like a spy. Scout seemed almost smug as he allowed Sarah to put the vest on him. With the official-looking gear, he was transformed from a friendly family pet into a professional working animal. No one would question his presence in a medical supply company. Sarah grabbed the files, the uniform shirt, and one of the two-way radios. She set the other radio to Charlie's frequency and left it on his kitchen table with a note. Officer Martinez, use this to monitor our progress. Channel 7 inches. The drive to Golden Years Healthcare Solutions took them through a part of the city Sarah had never visited before. It was an older commercial district, filled with warehouses and office buildings that had seen better days. Perfect for a company that wanted to operate just outside the spotlight. Scout directed their route by pressing his nose against the passenger window whenever Sarah needed to turn. His knowledge of the city's back roads was incredible. Every turn took them further from main streets and traffic cameras. Golden Years Healthcare Solutions occupied a converted warehouse with a small office area in front and what looked like storage and delivery bays in the back. The parking lot was half empty, but Sarah could see several expensive cars near the front entrance that definitely didn't belong to medical equipment workers. Scout was already wearing his service dog vest, and Sarah had put on the Golden Years uniform shirt over her regular clothes. To anyone watching, they would look like a delivery person with a service dog and her young son. Remember, Sarah whispered to Max as they approached the building. Scout is working right now, so we need to be very quiet and let him do his job. Max nodded solemnly. At 5 years old, he might not understand all the adult complications of what they were doing, but he understood that it was important, and that Scout was their guide. The front entrance led to a reception area that was designed to look friendly and trustworthy. Soft lighting, comfortable chairs, brochures featuring smiling elderly people using various medical devices. But Sarah noticed details that revealed the truth. reinforced glass at the reception desk, security cameras in every corner, and a door to the back area that required a key card to open. The receptionist, a young woman with carefully styled hair and a practiced smile, looked up as they entered. "Can I help you?" "Equipment delivery," Sarah said, trying to sound casual. "They told me to bring it to the back. I don't have any deliveries scheduled for today." Scout solved the problem by walking directly to the receptionist's desk and sitting down in the perfect position for a service dog. His vest and official demeanor made him impossible to question. "Oh, you have a service dog," the receptionist said, her whole attitude changing. "What a beautiful German shepherd. What's his name?" "Scout," Max said proudly. "He helps people." The receptionist's smile became genuine for the first time. "I bet he does. You know what? Let me just call back to the warehouse and see who's expecting a delivery." While she made the call, Scout did something subtle but brilliant. He walked over to the keycard door and sat down beside it, as if he was simply following his handler, but Sarah noticed that he had positioned himself so that his body blocked the security camera's view of the door handle. The receptionist hung up the phone, looking confused. "That's strange. Mr. Cardello's assistant says they're not expecting any deliveries, but she's been in meetings all day and might have missed it. Why don't you head back and ask for Jennifer in shipping?" She buzzed them through the door, and Sarah felt her heart racing as they entered the warehouse area. This was it. They were inside Vincent Cardello's operation. The warehouse was larger than it had looked from outside, filled with rows of medical equipment that ranged from legitimate wheelchairs and hospital beds to devices that Sarah was sure had been grossly overpriced to vulnerable customers. But Scout wasn't interested in the main warehouse floor. He led them immediately to a staircase at the far end of the building. "Where are we going, Scout?" Max whispered. Scout paused at the base of the stairs and gave his communication signal. But instead of the usual 2 light taps and 1 hard tap, he gave 3 hard taps. Danger ahead. Sarah felt her pulse quicken, but she trusted Scout completely. If he said they needed to go upstairs despite the danger, then that's where the evidence they needed would be found. The second floor was divided into offices, but most of them looked unused. Scout led them past empty cubicles and abandoned desks to a corner office with Vincent Cardello's name on the door. The office was locked, but Scout had anticipated this. He led them to a supply closet 3 doors down that was unlocked. Inside the closet, behind boxes of medical supply catalogs, was something that made Sarah's breath catch. A filing cabinet that Scout knew how to open. He pressed specific spots on the cabinet with his nose and paws, and Sarah realized he was entering some kind of combination. The cabinet opened to reveal exactly what they'd hoped to find, the real records of Golden Year's healthcare solutions. Not the sanitized files they showed to regulatory authorities, but the actual documents showing their predatory practices. Lists of elderly targets, scripts for high-pressure sales calls, and most damning of all, a ledger showing the millions of dollars they'd stolen from vulnerable seniors over the past 3 years. Sarah photographed every document with her phone, her hands shaking with adrenaline. This was it. This was the evidence that would shut down Vincent Cardello's operation and protect everyone in Charlie's network. But as she worked, Scout suddenly became alert. His ears were up, his body tense. Someone was coming. Heavy footsteps echoed from the stairwell, along with voices. Sarah recognized one of them, Vincent Cardello himself, speaking angrily into a phone. "I don't care what the police told you. Find that woman and her kid, and find that damn dog. They have files that could destroy everything we've built here." Scout immediately led Sarah and Max behind the filing cabinet, pressing them into the small space between the cabinet and the wall. It wasn't a perfect hiding spot, but it was the best they had. The footsteps stopped right outside the supply closet. "Did you check the building for intruders?" Cardello's voice was closer now, just outside the door. "Yes, sir. Security swept every floor. Nothing unusual except that delivery woman with the service dog who came through earlier. Receptionist said she was looking for shipping." "What delivery woman?" "Young mother with a little kid and a German shepherd. Had a Golden Year's uniform shirt." There was a long, terrifying pause. "We didn't schedule any deliveries today," Cardello said slowly. "And we don't have any female delivery drivers." Sarah felt Max press closer to her, and Scout positioned himself protectively in front of both of them. The office door was opening. "Search every room on this floor," Cardello ordered, "and call security. We have intruders in the building." Scout looked directly at Sarah, and gave the most complex communication signal she'd seen from him yet. A specific sequence of taps that somehow conveyed an entire plan. Sarah didn't understand all of it, but she understood the most important part. When Scout moved, they needed to follow him immediately. The supply closet door opened. Vincent Cardello stood silhouetted in the doorway, his expensive suit unable to hide the cold cruelty in his eyes. Behind him, 2 security guards with radios and weapons waited for orders. "Well, well," Cardello said, with a smile that never reached his eyes. "The famous painted dog and his new friends. I was wondering when you'd show up." Scout didn't growl or bark. Instead, he did something that surprised everyone in the room. He walked calmly over to Vincent Cardello and sat down directly in front of him, looking up with those intelligent eyes as if he was simply greeting an old acquaintance. "Smart dog," Cardello said. "Charlie trained you well. Too bad your owner won't be around much longer to appreciate your loyalty." That's when Scout struck. He didn't attack. That wasn't Scout's way. Instead, he pressed a specific spot on Cardello's belt with his nose, and Sarah heard a small click. Scout had just activated something, though she couldn't see what. "What the hell?" Cardello started to say, but his words were cut off by a sound that filled the entire warehouse. His own voice, amplified and crystal clear, playing from speakers throughout the building. "I don't care what the police told you. Find that woman and her kid, and find that damn dog. They have files that could destroy everything we've built here." Scout had somehow activated a recording device on Cardello's own belt, and now every word the man had spoken in the past hour was being broadcast throughout the building for everyone to hear. Every employee, every delivery driver, every security guard was hearing their boss admit to criminal conspiracy. But that wasn't all. As Cardello's recorded voice continued to play his threats and admissions of guilt, Sarah heard something else. Sirens. Multiple sirens, getting closer by the second. Scout's tail was wagging now, and he looked incredibly pleased with himself. He had been wearing more than just a service dog vest when they entered the building. He had been wearing a wire. Charlie and Scout hadn't just been building a case against golden years for months. They had been building a trap, and Sarah, Max, and Scout had just sprung it. Vincent Cardello realized what was happening just as the first police officers reached the second floor. His face went white with rage and fear. "You think this is over?" He snarled at Sarah. "You have no idea how deep this goes. Golden Years is just one piece of a much larger operation." Scout gave one final communication signal, 5 hard taps that Sarah somehow understood meant backup has arrived. Officer Martinez appeared in the doorway behind Cardello, his weapon drawn and a dozen federal agents behind him. "Vincent Cardello, you're under arrest for elder fraud, conspiracy, criminal threats, and about 15 other charges we'll think of on the way to the station." As they handcuffed Cardello, he looked directly at Scout with something like respect in his eyes. "Damn dog outsmarted us all," he muttered. But Sarah noticed something that made her stomach drop. Before Officer Martinez had appeared, one of Cardello's security guards had slipped away. And she remembered Cardello's words. Golden Years was just one piece of a larger operation. This wasn't over, not yet. Who do you think escaped? And what do you think is the larger operation that Cardello mentioned? Your guesses might be closer to the truth than you think. 3 hours later, Sarah sat in the police station with Max sleeping in her lap and Scout curled up at her feet. The adrenaline had finally worn off, leaving her exhausted but oddly proud. They had done it. They had exposed Vincent Cardello's operation and saved countless elderly victims from further exploitation. Officer Martinez approached with 2 cups of coffee and a concerned expression. "The federal agents want to debrief you about what you found in Cardello's files, but first, there's something you need to know." Sarah looked up wearily. "What now?" "The security guard who slipped away during the arrest. His name is Marcus Webb, and he's not just some hired muscle. According to Cardello's files, Webb has been running a parallel operation targeting children and families." Sarah felt cold dread settle in her stomach. What kind of operation? Child trafficking rings mostly. They identify vulnerable families through various front companies, medical supply companies, home repair services, charity organizations. Then they gather intelligence on family routines, school schedules, who lives alone with kids. Scout's head came up at the mention of children in danger, his ears alert and focused. "Officer Martinez," Sarah said slowly. "Max's school was in that photo they sent me. How did they know about Max's school if they were just focused on golden years?" "That's what worries me. Webb's operation is much larger than Cardello's elder fraud scheme. We think golden years was just a cover, a way to legitimize their presence in the community while they gathered information for much worse crimes." Max stirred in Sarah's lap, waking up as the adults' conversation grew more serious. "Mommy, are the bad people all caught now?" Before Sarah could answer, Scout stood up and walked to the police station window. His body language was tense again, the same alert posture he'd had when he sensed danger before. "What is it, Scout?" Sarah asked. Scout gave his danger signal, 3 hard taps, and continued staring out the window. In the parking lot, Sarah could see what had caught his attention. A white van with Community Children's Services painted on the side was parked across the street. It looked official, but something about it felt wrong. "Officer Martinez," Sarah said quietly. "Is that van supposed to be there?" Officer Martinez looked out the window and immediately reached for his radio. "All units, we have a suspicious vehicle in the station parking area. White van, license plate ... He squinted, trying to read the numbers, but the van was already pulling away. "That was Marcus Webb," Officer Martinez said grimly. "He's not giving up." Scout was pacing now, clearly agitated. He kept looking at Max, then at the door, then back at Max. Finally, he did something that surprised everyone. He gently took Max's hand in his mouth and led him to a specific spot in the police station, directly beneath a security camera and in clear view of multiple officers. "He's protecting Max," Sarah realized. "Scout knows that man is still hunting us." Officer Martinez's radio crackled with urgent reports. "Martinez, we've got reports of suspicious activity at Riverside Elementary School. White van seen circling the building during dismissal time." "That's Max's school," Sarah whispered. "And that's probably not a coincidence," Officer Martinez replied. "Webb is escalating. He knows we're onto him, so he's making desperate moves." Scout had been listening to the radio chatter, and now he walked over to Officer Martinez and sat down in front of him. He gave a complex series of taps that took several seconds to complete. "What's he saying?" Max asked. Sarah had been learning Scout's communication patterns all day, and this message was clearer than any of the others. "He's saying he knows where Webb is going next, and he wants to stop him." Officer Martinez looked skeptical. "Mrs. Chen, I know Scout is incredibly intelligent, but we can't base a police operation on a dog's intuition." Scout walked over to a map of the city mounted on the police station wall. He stood on his hind legs and pressed his nose to a specific location, the Riverside Community Center, the same place mentioned in Charlie's notebook as a safe haven for the Kindness Network. "Room 7, Sarah breathed, remembering the note in Charlie's journal. "Scout, is Webb going to the community center?" Scout's tail wagged once, and he gave his confirmation signal. Officer Martinez studied the map. The community center would be a perfect target for someone like Webb. Lots of families, kids from different neighborhoods, minimal security. And if he's been watching the Kindness Network, he'd know that's where vulnerable people go for help. Sarah felt her mama bear instincts kicking in again. "We have to warn them." "We will. I'll send units to the community center, immediately." But Scout had other plans. He walked to the police station exit and sat down, looking back at Sarah and Max expectantly. "He wants us to come with him," Max said. "Scout has a plan." Officer Martinez shook his head. "Absolutely not. You've done enough dangerous work for one day. Webb is desperate and armed, and he's specifically targeting your family." Sarah looked at Scout, who was practically vibrating with urgency. She thought about all the people in Charlie's network who might be at the community center that afternoon. Elderly residents attending health seminars, children in after-school programs, families seeking assistance with basic needs. "Officer Martinez, what if Scout's right? What if Webb is planning something at the community center right now, while we're sitting here debating? Then my officers will handle it. Your officers don't know the layout of the building like Scout does. They don't know which families are most vulnerable, or where Webb might try to strike." Scout seemed to understand the conversation, because he walked over to a bulletin board and nosed aside some papers, revealing a community center floor plan that had been posted underneath. He immediately went to room 7 and placed his paw on it, then traced a path showing multiple exits and entry points. He's been there before, Sarah realized. Many times. Scout knows that building better than anyone. Max tugged on his mom's sleeve. Mommy, if Scout thinks he can help, shouldn't we let him? Officer Martinez looked at the floor plan, then at Scout, then at Sarah and Max. I can't officially authorize civilians to participate in a police operation, but if concerned citizens happen to be in the area and provided valuable intelligence about the building layout and potential victims, that would be helpful. 20 minutes later, Sarah found herself in the back of an unmarked police car with Max and Scout, heading toward the Riverside Community Center. Officer Martinez was in the front seat, coordinating with multiple units through his radio. Units 3 and 5, position yourselves at the north and south entrances. Unit 7, cover the parking lot. No one moves until we have eyes on the suspect. Scout was pressed against the car window, his attention focused completely on their destination. As they got closer, Sarah could see why he was so concerned. The community center parking lot was busier than usual for a weekday afternoon, filled with families attending what looked like a special event. It's the monthly family resource fair, Officer Martinez said, reading from his notes. Perfect hunting ground for someone like Webb. Lots of stressed families, single parents, kids who might be easily separated from their guardians. Scout gave his danger signal again, and this time, Sarah could see what had triggered it. The white van was parked at the far end of the parking lot, positioned near the playground where several children were, playing while their parents attended workshops inside. He's here, Sarah whispered. Officer Martinez spoke into his radio. All units, suspect vehicle is on site. Repeat, Marcus Webb is on the premises. Approach with extreme caution. But Scout was already moving. The moment the car stopped, he was out the door and heading toward the community center with purpose. Not running frantically, but moving with the confident stride of someone who belonged there. Scout, wait, Sarah called. But he was already approaching a group of children near the playground. That's when Sarah saw something that made her heart stop. A man in a community children's services uniform was talking to a young mother near the swings. The woman looked distressed, and the man was taking notes on an official-looking clipboard. In the background, Sarah could see 2 small children playing alone, unaware that they were being watched. That's Webb, Officer Martinez said grimly. He's posing as a social worker. Scout had reached the children and was now positioning himself between them and Webb, his service dog vest, making him look completely natural in the setting. To any casual observer, he was just a therapy animal, providing comfort to kids at a community event. But Sarah could see what Scout was really doing. He was creating a barrier. Every time Webb tried to move closer to the children, Scout would casually reposition himself to block the approach. And he was doing it so naturally that Webb hadn't even noticed yet. The young mother was becoming more upset as Webb continued his fake interview. I'm sorry, but I don't understand why Children's Services would be here today. No one told me there was a problem. It's just a routine follow-up, ma'am, Webb was saying in a fake friendly voice. We've had some reports about children being unsupervised in this area. Scout had heard enough. He walked directly to the mother and gently pressed against her leg, the way he would if he was providing emotional support. When she looked down at him, he very deliberately looked at Webb, then back at her, his message clear. Oh my, the woman said, her voice changing. Your dog doesn't seem to like that man. Webb finally noticed Scout, and his expression changed completely. Recognition, followed by anger, followed by fear as he realized he'd been found. Ma'am, you need to keep that animal away from me, Webb said, backing up a step. But Scout wasn't backing down. He positioned himself directly between Webb and the children, his body language shifting from friendly service dog to protective guardian. He didn't growl or show aggression, but his message was unmistakable. Webb reached into his jacket, and Sarah's blood turned to ice. Officer Martinez was already moving, speaking urgently into his radio as he approached the playground. All units, suspect is armed. Repeat, suspect is armed and threatening civilians. That's when everything happened at once. Webb pulled out what looked like a tranquilizer gun, the same type his associates had used in the underpass. But instead of pointing it at Scout, he aimed it at one of the children. Back off, or the kid gets hurt, he shouted. Scout didn't hesitate. He launched himself forward, not at Webb, but at the child Webb was targeting. He knocked the little girl safely to the ground, just as Webb fired, the dart meant for the child, striking Scout in the shoulder instead. The playground erupted in chaos as parents grabbed their children, and police officers converged from all directions. Webb tried to run, but Officer Martinez tackled him before he could reach his van. Sarah reached Scout just as the tranquilizer was taking effect. He was lying on his side, his breathing shallow but steady, his eyes still alert and focused on the children around him. "Scout, you saved her," Sarah whispered, tears streaming down her face. "You saved that little girl." Max knelt down beside Scout and gently petted his head. "You're the bravest doggy in the whole world," he said softly. Scout's tail wagged weakly, and he managed to give one last communication signal. 2 light taps with his paw, 1 hard tap. Even drugged and barely conscious, he was telling them he was okay. Officer Martinez came over as the EMTs arrived to check on Scout. "He's going to be fine," he assured Sarah. "The tranquilizer Webb was using is designed to be non-lethal. Scout will sleep it off and be back to normal in a few hours." "And Webb?" "In custody, along with 3 associates we found in the van. They had enough equipment to abduct multiple children. Scout stopped something terrible from happening today." As the EMTs loaded Scout into their vehicle for monitoring, the young mother whose children Scout had protected came over to Sarah with tears in her eyes. "I don't know how to thank you," she said. "That man, if your dog hadn't been there—" "Scout's not my dog," Sarah said gently. "He belongs to a wonderful man named Charlie, who's been protecting people in this community for years. Scout was just doing what Charlie taught him, looking out for those who need help." Max tugged on his mom's sleeve. "But Scout is part of our family now too, right, Mommy?" Sarah looked at her son, then at Scout, sleeping peacefully in the EMT vehicle, then at the crowd of families who were safe because of a painted dog who had led them all on an incredible journey. "Yes, sweetheart, Scout is definitely part of our family." 6 hours later, they were back at the hospital visiting Charlie. Scout was fully recovered from the tranquilizer and was lying contentedly beside Charlie's bed while the elderly man read through police reports with amazement. "You did it, my boy," Charlie said, scratching Scout behind the ears. "You protected everyone, just like we always planned." Officer Martinez had stayed to brief Charlie on the arrests. "Vincent Cardello is looking at 20 years minimum for the elder fraud. Charges Marcus Webb and his associates are facing federal trafficking charges. The entire operation has been shut down." "What about the kindness network?" Sarah asked. "Will you be able to continue helping people?" Charlie smiled weakly. "That's the beautiful thing about a network built on genuine care. It doesn't depend on just one person. The families we've helped over the years, they're already helping each other. The symbols, the safe houses, the check-in systems, they'll continue because people believe in taking care of each other." Scout walked over to the window and looked out at the city below. Somewhere out there, elderly residents were receiving groceries they couldn't afford. Children were walking home safely from school, and vulnerable families were finding the support they needed. The kindness network was alive and growing, spreading from person to person like ripples in a pond. Max climbed up into the hospital bed beside Charlie. "Mr. Charlie, can Scout still help people even though he lives with us now?" Charlie laughed, the first real joy Sarah had seen from him since his stroke. "Max, Scout has been helping people since the day he was born. Moving in with your family just means he'll have more people to help him with the work." Scout's tail wagged, and he gave his signature communication signal. 2 light taps, 1 hard tap. Yes. But then he did something new. He walked to each person in the room, Charlie, Sarah, Max, and Officer Martinez, and gave each of them the same gentle head bump he'd given Max in the park 3 days ago. A signal of trust, of family, of commitment to continue the work together. "I think," Sarah said, watching Scout's deliberate gestures, "we're all part of the kindness network now." As the sun set outside the hospital window, casting golden light across the room, Scout settled down with a contented sigh. The painted dog who had stumbled into their lives in distress had become the guardian angel who protected an entire community. And somewhere in the city, in houses marked with gentle symbols of care and compassion, families were sleeping safely because a German shepherd named Scout had shown them that even in the darkest times, kindness could light the way home. 3 months later, the Scout Foundation was officially established, with Charlie as the director and Sarah as the volunteer coordinator. Max had started kindergarten and insisted on teaching his classmates about kindness codes. And Scout continued doing what he'd always done, finding people who needed help and making sure they got it. The only difference was that now he had a whole family to help him with the work. What act of unexpected kindness changed your life the way Scout changed Sarah's family? Share your story below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell, because everyone deserves to hear stories that remind us how powerful compassion can be.